Hi all, I hope that you're doing really well today. Some people just ask me how I use the Russian dolls in my therapy. And so I thought I would just do a little demonstration really on how you are able to use the Russian dolls. And so there's a couple of ideas here. A lot of people use them in multiple ways. I mean, there's lots and lots of different ways of using these. But if you think about Russian dolls in general, the principle of them is that they are obviously multi-layered. So, any sort of parts work or any exploration work into how the person has been feeling and the layers of the person, it's a really excellent way of working and uncovering things which maybe ordinarily the client hasn't really looked at. So, firstly, where do you get them from? Well, there's a lot of different variety of these type of dolls on places like Amazon and eBay. So have a look around and see if you can pick some up. They're a beautiful ornament to keep anyway. I have this one, Pride of Place. And actually this particular set I got in Russia itself when I was visiting St. Petersburg a few years ago. And if you ever get a chance to go to Russia, I really highly recommend it. It is one of the most beautiful places architecturally. So you can get all of these types and lots and lots and lots of different varieties of Russian dolls for quite a reasonable amount of money. Some of the Russian dolls that I saw in St. Petersburg went into thousands and thousands of pounds. I think actually one of them was about £500,000. And they've got whole shops dedicated to them over there. So it's quite remarkable. Anyway, it's good if you can have a selection of different types, because if you have different types, then somebody can actually identify with a particular style. As you can see, I've got a fairy one there and a plain one, and sometimes this is really good. So how do we use them in therapy terms? There really are so many ways that you can use the Russian dolls. Some people use them for problem solving, so perhaps breaking the problem down into layers, and then perhaps in turn, rebuilding the problem with a set of solutions, and that is a really, really useful way of working with them. As you can hear, these ones are quite squeaky. They haven't actually, the plain ones are less used by clients, funnily enough. I keep meaning to get some more sort of generic looking ones, just, patterned ones really to use with clients. Anyway, so you can use a timeline also with Russian dolls. And I'm going to do a little bit about that in a minute. I'm going to cover that in more detail. So because they have all of those layers, as I said before, they are extremely useful to explore different parts of our personality. So let's look at that in more detail. So I'm going to just remove these ones away just for the time being, but I will show you those in a little bit more detail in a second. Now, this is my favourite set. And when I began to actually use these myself, I used them as a way of expressing where I was in life and how that equated to my different parts. So in a second, I'm just going to show you a worksheet that I devised that I now use with my clients. So 1 second and I'll grab that. Okay, so I'm back, and here is the worksheet that I use for... I actually devised it after doing my own work with the Russian dolls. And as you can see, you've got you've got the Russian dolls in sequence going down smaller and smaller. And each one of these represents a different thing to the client. Now, these things can alter, so it's always better to kind of say, you know, some people say that this major part, the outside part, is the part that you'd like to share with the world. And then the part that comes next is the part that perhaps your friends see. But actually, this can change, and it's okay for the client to choose whatever that particular part of the doll means to them. So let's start with actually how I'll work you through what my thinking with regards to it, and it'll hopefully make a bit more sense. So I immediately began to use this outer doll as the part of me that I did present to the whole world. So that was the working person. That's the me, in my professional role. That's the tutor, the supervisor, the one which didn't offer much of my true self out there to people, or really even particularly on the internet. And the one that really wouldn't often talk about the other layers of my life, because my outer doll focus was to concentrate on other people and other people's lives, clients, students, not myself necessarily. Now, it was good for me to acknowledge that person I was presenting I actually quite liked, but there were other areas that of the next layer of the person that I felt in a way I could slightly bring in to client work. So a little bit more sort of personal identification could come in when it came to sort of, a tiny bit of self-disclosure and that sort of thing. Now, this person, this particular doll, represents me and the person that only really friends get to see. So this part of me ended up being that part where friends see a little bit more about who I am as a person. And the genuine me who likes to be helpful and useful to others, but also the part which sometimes needs things in return. And I think when I was exploring this part, I think I'd been kind of neglecting that part for a fair while, because I think my assumption growing up, maybe learnt behaviours from parents and stuff, was that you kept your private life very private, and that had even leached into my friendships and stuff. And I'd had, quite often I'd get people say to me, you know all about me, but actually I feel as though I don't know very much about you at all. So I did some good work to uncover why it was not so comfortable telling people about me. And I won't bore you with the details of it, but suffice to say, I began to feel somewhat more confident and comfortable to share problems with friends. And obviously that had a massive impact on my own mental health in a positive way. And I also discovered the value of being able to have another layer between professional self and close family self. But, so that kind of became a little bit more fluid between the different parts of my personality. So the next one along, this one was representative of the part that your family sees. Now, that part there is the part where you maybe share, maybe extended family members get to see some parts of you and not others. So, some of your family members have your back in situations if you need them, and the family values that you hold close to your heart, etc. But at that level there, maybe you know who those people are who you can depend on, but you wouldn't necessarily disclose absolutely everything to those people, and that's okay, of course. They serve, looking at the part of you that kind of sees your family and friends, and that part that they see actually is a really useful tool to look at your social interactions between you and family members, and family dynamics and that sort of thing. So the next part was this part here. And this was the part that the closest people get to see. So, that's the part of you where you might feel like you can be a screaming banshee one moment and a loving partner or sibling or daughter the next. But that person is only usually reserved for very close family members. And that part, obviously, is the part which... she's fallen over, is the part that, you get that quite a deep set of realisations about how other people influence our life in general. So parents and, other people who are very close to us, siblings, and people who maybe we live with, life partners and that sort of thing. So the final part, which was this little mini me, that was the part that only you see. Now, that part there is actually very useful because maybe it might equate to that inner self. Perhaps it's going to be the inner child part. And that's the part of me that nobody else gets to see. That part that reacts without thinking, possibly, and that holds all of the automatic responses to programs set up in very early childhood. So again, that part of the whole process is very revealing, and it takes sometimes quite a while for that part to be worked through. You can really begin to look at that part of a person, help them explore that part that only they ever see. So that's their deepest, darkest, reactions and thought processes. It's the inner voice that sometimes can be due to, very early programming, can sometimes be a little bit negative in the way that it talks. It can be the part that anxiety comes from. Those responses that have been actually, it helps if you don't drop it on its head, that have been set up for, defense reasons or survival reasons. So that's a really, really great place to be able to explore. So, as you can see, you can get an extremely good amount of information out of using these different parts of self. And to be perfectly honest with you, it doesn't have to, particularly run in this linear line. You can have the client say, well, this top part of me is the part at work where I'm, extremely, proactive and, and I have a really, really good work ethic. And this is the part of me at home where, I really I consider myself quite lazy and, I don't really want to contribute, and I feel like, the children are an imposition and a chore on my relationship, so you can kind of see how each stage can be very much dictated to by the client. So I hope that one in particular makes sense. We'll move on next to how we can incorporate using the Russian dolls in a slightly different way, in more of a timeline style. Okay, so here we have our, very roughly drawn out diagram of a timeline. And what you ask the client to do is actually make the timeline up in any way that they want to. And let's just assume that, you know, my client has done the time like this, and has started off with when they were born. So let's assume that they put a lovely fairy Russian doll on the point at which they were born. So you would then have a discussion about their life and as it looked at the time that they were born. So you might talk about parents. You may have a discussion about, and they can write all this down. Parents, maybe where they lived. So, you know, let's just write this down here. They moved house, and they started, you know, living somewhere else. Perhaps around the whole family structure at this point. So perhaps their mum was a single mum when the baby was born. So whatever the client wants to write about their start in life, they can obviously write there. As you can see, their little journey went through to significant life events. So their sister was born. Let's just say they choose this particular doll for that reason. So it becomes almost like a place setting of their life. So their sister was born at that time. How old were they when the sister was born? Let's write down aged 7. So they'd started school, and you might actually have a chat about them to them about how school was. How was school at that time? School was overwhelming, or whatever it happened to be. Again, great point for discussion. These sort of techniques work particularly well for visual sort of people. But, you know, actually, if you've got a vaguely creative client, this can really, really open up masses of discussion about various areas of their life. So let's have a look at when they got to be 13. So at age 13, the mum and dad got divorced. So this can be representative of when they were 13. And the owl could be significant in some way because actually they felt as though they had to grow up very quickly. And so therefore they got a sort of older wisdom at the time of their mum and dad's divorce. So again, you can talk all around that. You know, how were they feeling at the time? What were the major kind of points for them when that actually happened? At 15, their uncle died. So again, you can start to say, okay, so where would you put yourself there? Well, I'd put myself there. What happened surrounding the death of your uncle? Again, a massive sort of, discussion can open up there. What happened around the time of your uncle? Were you close to your uncle? Oh, well, there were things that I never got to say. So, okay, so there were things that you'd never got to say. Would you actually like to process some of that through now as an adult self? You're obviously 15 and, unable to actually, really truly process it at the time. So do you think that it would be good to be able to actually have that conversation and process it through with your uncle? And of course, here you can identify grief work if it's needed. So, as you can see, we just go on and we're just adding more and more detail. But what the client's doing is really sort of processing through all of those times in their life where something traumatic or major event has happened. And it's really, really useful to actually, have them coming up into the present day. So, let's just say, for example, they choose the bear when they had a particularly traumatic birth. Again, there's an area of trauma that you might be able to help them resolve. And finally, they get to be their adult self, in the here and the now. And actually, how does that here and now look to them? What is their life like at the moment as their sparkly fairy self? So, these are the sort of creative ways in which you can start to use the Russian dolls in your practice. Now, like I said, there's lots and lots of different other ways of using them. So have fun with them. And if there are any other ways that I know that a few therapists kind of train different ways of using them. I use them in very simple ways, really. I know there's a Russian doll technique, which is an hypnotic one that a guy called Derek Chapman, I think his name is, he trains a whole kind of hypnotic way of using them. I tend to just use them in this very simple way, in the ways that we've discussed today. But, there's lots and lots of different ways of using these particular techniques with your clients. And I try as much as I can to work in creative ways with the client, because it just fires off all of those different areas of their brain. And you may choose to identify different areas from the work that you do just simply with the Russian dolls. For example, in this particular instance, you might need some clearing work. There may be some jealousy stuff going on. The divorce of the mum and dad, you might want to deal with that. And obviously the uncle's death and the traumatic birth. You've got, obviously this is an extreme example, but you have quite a lot going on in everybody's life. And obviously people's lives are interesting. So this gives you a really, really great tool to use just to enable yourself to get really into the depths of, what the client needs to do the work on in the first place. So I hope that this has been very beneficial to you. And if you have any questions, or you would like to talk to me about different ways that you use them, or you'd like to share within the group setting or maybe on YouTube, then give me a shout, comment in the comment section. And I'm always really, really pleased to do these videos for you all and get your feedback at the same time. So take care, everybody. Bye.